This episode is made possible by Roundel. If you partner with Roundel, you can reach over 165 million guests who look to Target for joy and inspiration. It's a lot of people. Together with you, they'll design curated media solutions that are a seamless extension of the Target experience. And everything, all of it, is backed by unparalleled first-party data and, of course, measurement. If you would like to find out more about what I'm talking about, you can head to roundel.com.
It's moving very cautiously on AI. It doesn't even like to use the term AI, so it calls it Apple Intelligence. And so I think it's offloading some of the riskier generative AI capabilities to OpenAI, and then it's doing some of the more simple tasks using smaller AI models that are on device.
Hey gang, it's Monday, June 24th. Yuri, Jacob, and listeners, welcome to the Buying Numbers Daily, a new marketing podcast made possible by Roundel. I'm Marcus. Today I'm joined by two folks. We start with our technology analyst. He's based in California. It's Jacob Bourne.
Hi, Marcus.
Hey, fella. We're also joined by one of our principal analysts who covers everything advertising, media, and tech. It's, of course, Yuri Wamser.
Hey, Marcus. How are you?
Hey, chap. Very good, very good. Based in New Jersey, he is. Today, we're talking all about Apple Intelligence. But we start with today's fact. How do Americans pay for things? So, this is according to a Visual Capitalist article that used Federal Reserve data to track the share of payment methods. So, gents, what do you think the number 1, 2, and 3 payment methods are today? You can choose from debit, credit, and cash.
I'd say credit.
Credit number 1, Yuri?
I'd go with credit number 1 and debit number 2.
Exactly right. It wasn't the case in 2016. In 2016, just, what's that, 8 years ago? It seems like very recently, 2016, but it was 8 years ago. Cash was king with 31% of the share of payment methods, 31%. Debit cards, 27%, and credit cards use 18% of the time. But by 2022, I guess it's not 8 years because this data is from 2016 to 2022. So 6 years later, credit cards had taken the crown, going from 18 to 31%. Debit cards were still second, up a touch with 29%, and cash had fallen from 31 to 18%, landing it in third place, a few points ahead of electronic fund transfers, EFTs, at 13%.
Now, a lot has changed.
A lot has changed, and this Visual Capitalist article by Marcus Liu pointed out some very probable drivers of cash losing its importance. 1, hygiene concerns, fear over COVID transmission using cash push folks to digital payments. 2, social distancing, the shift towards online shopping and delivery services during lockdowns. And number 3, banking adjustments, reduced access to ATMs and banking services during lockdowns made it harder to get cash. But still a lot, that's 18% in terms of a share of payment methods is still decently high for cash. So it's hanging on, but going down. Today's real topic, Apple Intelligence and a partnership with OpenAI. So in today's episode, first in the lead, we'll cover Apple Intelligence. Then for another news, we'll discuss the potential of the AI PC. Gents, we're talking Apple Intelligence. And so Zoe Kleiman and Liv McMahon of the BBC write that Apple is to boost its Siri voice assistant and operating systems with OpenAI's ChatGPT. As part of their new personalized AI system, it's called Apple Intelligence, and it will help users navigate Apple devices more easily. Apple Intelligence uses Gen AI to help users summarize messages. It can instantly write replies to emails and texts in your own writing style, edit photos, or create reaction-based Genmojis, as they're called, and speak to a somewhat more capable Siri voice assistant as well. The goal for Apple is to have a ubiquitous AI system that knows all about you, from your messages, calendars, maps, etc., and then it can surface the right information and even take action on your behalf, if you so allow it. An Economist article describes it as a cross between your personal assistant, who can handle a series of tasks on your behalf, and your 10-year-old kid, who can tell you how to make use of your iPhone's latest features. For some tough questions, though, Siri will ask users if they're okay if she asks OpenAI's GPT-4o for some help. The feature is free for Apple customers, and their data won't be used to train ChatGPT. Apple Intelligence arrives later this year. No financial agreements were disclosed regarding the OpenAI and Apple partnership. So that's the backdrop. Let me start with Yuri. What was your initial reaction to the introduction of Apple Intelligence?
I'm pretty excited about it, to be honest. I think it's a big deal. A couple of things for Apple itself, for the iPhone itself. It's an integrated strategy around AI. So all parts of the the iPhone are kind of woven together by this AI strategy, this personalized AI strategy. So I think it's a really good move for Apple, the Apple Intelligence overall. The most interesting part is Siri. And I'm really curious to see how OpenAI benefits from this. I know what their strategy is, or I think I know what their strategy is. That is, they want to drive traffic and upsells to ChatGPT, but there are a lot of unknowns on that side.
Well, let's talk about that for a second then. I mean, what does this mean for OpenAI? We'll come back to Apple in a second, but they're doing this partnership with OpenAI. What does this mean for that company?
I mean, I think this means a ton of exposure for OpenAI. And really right now in the commercial generative AI race, it's really about getting more market share. Doesn't matter how much money you're making off of it yet, it will soon.
Yeah.
But they really want to get more people using ChatGPT. That's the name of the game.
Right.
And I think by having this run right on, right through the Apple's ecosystem, they're definitely going to get some more traction.
And that's a significant amount of scale. Yeah, OpenAI says it has around 100 million weekly users. Apple says it has 2.2 billion devices in use around the world. So a tremendous amount of scale in a hurry. Yuri, what else does this mean for OpenAI?
Well, I'm curious what it means in terms of their need of compute power. I know a lot of this stuff is happening locally on the phone, but not all these answers are going to be answered on the phone. I think the majority of more complicated ones are going to go bounce to the cloud, and OpenAI is going to have to pay for that, or at least use their credits with Microsoft. So I think this is going to be a huge challenge for them to deal with that big step up in usage.
Yeah. I think Yuri makes a great point, because OpenAI has had challenges keeping ChatGPT online at points. And I think it's because of the amount of traffic going to it and the amount of compute resources.
Yeah. This also seemed to me like it was a bit of a moment for OpenAI as it kind of establishing itself as a company in this space. I mean, obviously it has tried to do that for the last 18 months, but Apple, the third richest company in the world, conceding that it can't do AI better, at least for the moment, felt like a bit of a milestone. And yeah, this agreement isn't exclusive. And so they could partner with other people. I think that Apple, maybe there's a world where they continue to develop their own AI. And at some point they say, we don't need you anymore because we've got a system which is somewhat comparable to what OpenAI has, if that's even possible. But I thought that was interesting. And then, gents, what do you make of this? I mean, it seems as though the antitrust folks, they were circling already. There was a New York Times article a few weeks ago. The US clears way for antitrust inquiries of NVIDIA, Microsoft, and OpenAI. How much do you think this ratchets up the pressure on them from an antitrust perspective?
I think it definitely ratchets it up. In two ways, it gives Apple a lot of power. One is just in terms of hosting these different chatbots, whether it's Gemini from Google or OpenAI's ChatGPT. It gives them a lot of power in terms of, whether they stick with them or provide other alternatives. But I think secondly, once you create this ecosystem where you can go straight into apps and get information, it gives Apple even more power in terms of, over the whole app ecosystem and how much exposure these apps have. So I think that's probably the more fundamental way that it raises antitrust issues.
Jacob, that was one of my concerns. It was one article, I can't remember what it was now, a headline or a subheadline, maybe a sentence in it, but it was basically saying, like, what does this mean for apps? Because it's talking about surfacing a lot of this info. Like one of the examples it says in terms of how Apple Intelligence can help you is if you say, open that podcast my wife sent me a few days ago, and Siri goes into your email or your messages from the person it knows is the user's wife. It finds the recent link to the podcast and then opens the file in the podcast app. So that's like 3 or 4 apps you might have to open to find this thing. And now it's just going to basically fire up the one you need.
Right. And it kind of changes people's relationship with or it could change people's relationship with their phone in terms of how they navigate their phone. Instead of swiping and looking for apps, they're accessing what they need, through a generative AI model. And so we could see some apps benefit from that, and then some, potentially be at a disadvantage.
That's true. Yeah, there might be some winners here as well. Yeah, some other examples it was saying you could find out what time your mum's flight lands, find a certain photo and send it to a certain friend. These things do seem helpful, but yeah, what does that do to the usage? It did seem, gents, one of my takeaways was that it felt underwhelming, but that appears to be by design.
It does.
The Apple Intelligence announcement.
Yes. And I think here, Apple is really concerned about its reputation. It's moving very cautiously on AI. It doesn't even to use the term AI, so it calls it Apple Intelligence.
Right.
And so I think it's offloading some of the riskier generative AI capabilities to OpenAI, and then it's doing some of the more simple tasks using smaller AI models that are on device, on the iPhone, on your Mac. But I still think even with these more simple tasks, there are still things that could go wrong. And I think that is something for Apple to be cautious about.
Yep. Yeah, they're not trying to help you do something you've never done before. It's focusing its AI on being personalized, private, and practical is what it says. And that seems like it. Practical is probably just what the doctor ordered. Again, doesn't feel revolutionary, but that's not what people are looking for. That's not what most consumers can handle. And Gen AI has been criticized for being a solution in search of a problem. Apple is trying to use it to reduce friction for its iPhone users' experience every day. And there was actually a good quote, Nathaniel Whitmore, CEO of AI education company Superintelligent, saying, quote, "One of the realities of Gen AI right now is that the impact isn't about wiping out entire industries off the map, but about individuals finding small but significant time savings through new AI-powered processes. Apple Intelligence is betting that the way most people are going to get into AI is by doing the same things they're doing now, just a little faster."
Yes. And I think what Apple is doing here is really trying to sell its iPhone and its Macs. It's not trying to sell AI. And I think that's the main difference between it and the other tech giants.
Yeah, at the end of the day, they're a device company. By and large, they do some services, but I think it's only about 20% of their business revenue-wise. And so almost everything Apple does is about selling more phones. Sales of phones, which make up half of Apple's revenues, are slowing down. Apple's worldwide shipments of iPhones just saw its lowest Q1 in 3 years. And then also a year ago, iPhones accounted for 40% of all smartphones activated in the US. That figure is now 33%, according to consumer intelligence research partners. So they're trying to do things to stem the tide of kind of iPhone sales plateauing and starting to tick down a bit. Hope King of Axios pointing out that the newest AI features are available only in the company's most powerful phones, meaning customers will have to upgrade to get access to Apple Intelligence. They're putting it in their new devices. If you want access to Apple Intelligence, you're going to have to buy those new devices. And a lot of people are due for an upgrade. A lot of the upgrade cycle was about 4 years ago when 5G was kind of hitting devices. And so 3-4 years is typically when people say, this phone isn't working anymore, or it feels slow, or I can't scratch it any more than I have. And so they're looking for a new one.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is really going to drive a super cycle. I mean, depending on how good it is when it comes out. But if it is legitimately a game changer, unless you have an iPhone 15 Pro or newer, at that point, it'll probably an iPhone 16, you won't be able to use it. And I think that'll drive a lot of upsells if, in fact, it is revolutionary.
Yeah, for sure.
It seems like, I mentioned some of the examples it says it can do already. Some of the examples it can do. You mentioned Siri being a huge part of this, Yuri. Jason Ayton of Inc. suggesting a few ideas. One was a few ideas of what it could do. Siri could notice an email from a colleague. Notice an email from your colleague asking if you're available for a meeting next Tuesday. See your calendar is pretty full. Suggest a different time. And a step further would be it would send you a notification and offer to reply to the email in your tone and voice. So noticing things before you even notice them and suggesting things so that there is less friction. It says it's trying to be this kind of personal concierge whilst making Gen AI more consumer friendly. The other part of this, gents, I wonder what you make of this, is Apple kind of got made fun of for relying on OpenAI for its AI, but others haven't fared much better, right? Google and Microsoft both face backlash over the mistakes for their AI products already.
Not only that, but if you think about it, Apple's approach isn't wildly different from Microsoft's. I mean, both companies are working to improve their internal AI capabilities, while in the interim relying on OpenAI. The difference is that Microsoft got to it first, but it's really it's a very similar strategy.
Mm-hmm. Let's not forget that that's what Apple did with Maps and navigation and search, and Google. They make $10+ billion in traffic acquisition costs from Google. So there is some upside there for Apple.
Yeah, they can. And like I was saying, they can always develop their own AI and then cut OpenAI out because it's not an exclusive relationship. Apple, they could use Gemini, Alphabet's Gemini potentially. And I've always said this, content is king. I mean, the content here is ChatGPT's answers. Is it going to surface the best answers? But the wild card there is that the pipes that carry the content, in this case, the iPhone, are the ace. You need the devices to carry the answers in the first place. So Apple's in such a strong position in that regard. The other element here is partnering with OpenAI kind of gives Apple a bit of a liability shield. David Wagner, portfolio manager at Apple shareholder Aptus Capital Advisors, was saying Apple is passing off the liabilities of AI to a partner like OpenAI because it knows which battles to fight. Jacob, to your point, very strong brand, particularly when it comes to privacy. And so is that fair to say this gives them a bit of kind of a liability shield because they can, they say we're relying on OpenAI?
It is a bit of a liability shield, but still the Apple Intelligence itself, the part that's not using ChatGPT, is still accessing some pretty personal content on people's phones, even if it's not doing so through the cloud.
True.
If Apple Intelligence gets something wrong when using people's calendar or contacts or anything, and it does so frequently, then that could be a trust issue for consumers.
Mm-hmm. I mean, this might have led me into my last question, which is why might this be a bad direction for Apple? Any other reasons?
I mean, I think apart from that, it's largely probably a good direction for Apple just because it's a big tech company and not getting into generative AI at this point is not an option. It pretty much had to do something.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's doing something, it's offloading some of the risk to OpenAI, which I think is probably a safe move. If Apple Intelligence works as advertised, then I think it should be in the clear. I think that's probably the biggest question.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think one other downside is that, just like they do get traffic acquisition costs from Google, but they don't get the advertising. They don't get upsells of, they're giving those upsells to OpenAI or Gemini or whatever for professional services, which is something they're, I think, willing to give up, but that is something they're losing.
Mm-hmm. So real quick, just to quantify it for folks, we talked a lot. How much of an impact, Jacob, would this have on the AI race out of 10?
I would say it's high. I would say it's an 8 out of 10. And the reason being, so far we're seeing a lot of enthusiasm coming from the enterprise over generative AI, and consumers are maybe unfamiliar with generative AI, maybe don't know how to use it, maybe don't trust it. Apple's move here is directly aimed at the average consumer. And it's taking such a different approach with this very simple approach to technology. It's not a lot of fanfare around this. Meanwhile, the other tech giants, some of them are, have announcing grand plans about how they plan to build an artificial general intelligence, which consumers maybe don't want or need.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, Apple's kind of being a pioneer here in terms of potentially bringing generative AI to the masses. And I think that's going to make a huge difference in the race.
Yeah. Yuri?
I was going to say 8 out of 10, but that would be boring. So I'm going to say 7 out of 10.
7.9.
Yeah, no, I think it is important. I think a lot depends on the execution. So I'd say it's a little too early to say whether it's an 8, but I think potentially it's definitely very important. In one other way, it's very important too. I think devices are going to, wearable devices like smart glasses and will utilize something like Siri or Gemini or Meta AI or whatever. So this helps Apple with that as well.
Yeah. All right, gents. That's where we'll leave the lead story for today. Time now for the fourth quarter of the show. Today, in other news, just one story. Get ready for the AI PC. Ian Fried of Axios is saying that we should get ready for the AI PC. They note that the biggest names in computing are all pouring resources into building Gen AI into their devices, hoping to inject the venerable PC market with a boost of AI excitement. The promise of the AI PC is that because of an AI processor called a neural processor or a neural engine, you'll be able to do more of the work on the device as opposed to in the cloud. Ms. Fried points out that could strengthen data privacy and reduce climate-stressing data center power demands. Microsoft has already said it will equip Windows PCs with AI features, including dedicated Copilot AI keyboard key. But Jacob, I'll start with you. What interests you most about the advent of the AI PC?
Yeah, so I think first, in order to really get these AI PCs up and running to their full potential, we're going to need to see some more powerful and highly efficient AI chips than what I think are currently available today. Of course, the chip companies are working on it. But I think the really exciting thing is that once we get there, we're going to see a huge spillover effect into other devices. And, ultimately, we're going to see things like, generative AI-powered smart appliances that don't require internet access to function. And I think at the end of it all, we're going to see the robotics industry really use these highly advanced AI chips to really power, independent advanced robots that can, act out in the real world.
Mm-hmm. Yuri?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Jacob. I also think it changes the interface with desktops and it potentially has revolutionary effect as something like Windows did 25, 30 years ago, where how you interact, how you choose things could just change to more voice mode or using fuller descriptions rather than clicking and typing things in. I don't think it's going to be that extreme right away, but I think it provides an entryway for that type of interface.
One of the stories here was that Microsoft was going to launch something called Recall, a new AI feature, but it's since pulled that feature. It was supposed to be part of its new Copilot Plus, but because of security concerns, it's decided not to release that. So Recall was going to let you quickly find anything you've ever seen or done on your laptop. It can also rewind your work session back to a specific moment so you could change your mind about a particular direction you took. Quickly, Jacob, what's going on there?
Well, I think there's just such speed and momentum in terms of some of these feature rollouts around generative AI. And the security community is really concerned about potential unintended consequences of these features, especially when you have, the AI accessing everything on people's computers, even if it is on device. There's just a significant amount of concern about security breaches that we haven't seen to the scale that could be, could be at risk of much bigger breaches than in the past.
How is this different from Apple Intelligence, though? Because that is saying we're going to access everything that's in your phone and we're going to try to present the most relevant information when you need it. This is kind of a similar feature-ish.
I mean, I think it is pretty similar. Apple generally has a better reputation than the Windows ecosystem for security, but it's definitely something that's relevant in the Apple ecosystem as well.
Yeah. AI PCs, they're already here. According to Canalys, nearly 20% of PCs shipped this year will have AI capabilities. That's rising to 60% by 2027. And the PC market could use a shot in the arm. Worldwide PC shipments have been falling since 2021. And by a lot, shipments were down 30% from 2021 to 2023. So in just those 2 years, down 30% according to IDC. That's what we've got time for this episode. Thank you so much to my guests. As always, thank you to Yuri.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Thank you, Jacob.
Thank you, Marcus. Thank you, Yuri.
Thank you to Victoria, who edits the show, Stuart, who runs the team, Sophie, who does our social media, and thanks to everyone for listening in. We hope to see you tomorrow for a special video podcast of the Behind the Numbers Daily, an eMarketer podcast made possible by Roundel. You can go to YouTube and search for eMarketer if you would like to watch that episode, or you can listen to it all the places you normally listen to us.